Episode 7, The Treaty of Versailles and Weimar Politics. Any and all information covered in this audiobook originated from the 7th chapter of the First Germany booklet. There was remarkably little public scrutiny of the work of the National Assembly in making the Constitution. Most public attention was taken by the process of negotiating a peace, which began in January 1919. On paper, the German position in 1918 had looked strong, but this was deceptive. It was largely because of the collapse of Russia into communist revolution and civil wars that the position in the East was so flattering. Meanwhile, the British naval blockade had crippled German industry and reduced German cities to starvation. The entrance of the US into the war, along with the renewed attacks from the British and French armies on the Western Front, actually made the military conquest of Germany by the Allies a very real prospect. Keep in mind the military reality with the on-paper appearance of the situation. It is so important to understand. The German negotiators had little power, and the real debates in Versailles were between Britain and representatives from its empire, especially South Africa, Canada and Australia, France and the USA, with some further input from Italy. Wilson and the USA's main objective was the establishment of a League of Nations to resolve all future conflicts through a system of collective security and undermine the imperial powers, France, Britain, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire, by introducing the idea of national self-determination in the organization of borders. This irritated Britain and France. Clemenceau and France's main objectives were to obtain compensation from Germany, called reparations, as well as ensuring Germany was so weak economically and militarily that it could never threaten France again. So they wanted high reparations and important industrial territories of Alsace and Lorraine. France's goal was to take all of Germany up to the Rhine, to create a natural border between France and Germany, and take most of Germany's high-tech and heavy industry in this area. Wilson and Lloyd George did not want this. It stopped Britain's economic goals and undermined Wilson's objective of national self-determination. Germans would be forced to become French. Lloyd George and Britain's main objectives were muddled and mainly focused on getting back to normal and going along with US demands about the League and French demands for vengeance and security as little as possible. Key British advisers, like the economist Maynard Keynes, emphasized that a quick return to trading and manufacturing was the best way of ensuring peace. This irritated Wilson, as he wanted a new arrangement of borders in Europe and a new way of doing business internationally, not the old way. This upset Wilson because he wanted to break up multinational empires like Germany, Austria, Hungary, Ottoman into independent states based on a sort of approximation of national identities like Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Latvia, each with their own tariffs, borders, customs duties. This broke up large, effective free trade zones. It upset the French because they wanted vengeance and were worried about German economic domination. So, nobody, including the Allies, was really getting what they wanted in this situation. The final draft of the treaty was published in May 1919, and the German government resigned rather than accept the terms. Finally, the SPD and Zentrum passed it on 23 June, accepting that restarting the war was not an option. Thus, the DVP refused to be involved. The majority SPD and the Catholic Zentrum accepted responsibility for it. The Versailles Treaty, Truth and Fiction. Public and political attitudes in Germany to the Versailles Treaty were dramatic, hostile, and convulsive. But in fact, political leaders in the Weimar Republic were subsequently very effective at managing the problems it caused, getting it changed, and avoiding its most challenging aspect. The main terms of the treaty as published in 1919 were acceptance of war guilt. Article 231, the War Guilt Clause. This made the German government acknowledge that it alone was responsible for the war. This was difficult to accept because A. Austria, Hungary and Russia were the first to mobilize, but those countries were either in revolution, Russia, or had been broken up and no longer existed, Austria. Hungary, because of the German political class's obsession with encirclement and having no natural borders. German leaders emphasized British and French imperial rivalry and never acknowledged the problems with invading Belgium and France. Most favored trading nation status for Allied powers. Germany wanted to rebuild its economy and trade as it had before with Latin America and Central Europe. However, the Allies forced Germany to lower tariffs with France, the USA and Britain, meaning those countries had the economic advantages. Germany was banned from all protective tariffs, charging taxes in imported goods for 5 years, making its economy hugely vulnerable. Loss of territory. Germany lost 13 of its territory, but 14.6% of its farmland, 74.5% of its iron ore, 68% of its zinc ore, and 25% of its coal reserves. The Sauerland was separated from Germany, and this was where many of the country's coal mines were. Furthermore, Alsace and Lorraine were given to France. This was where much of the country's coal, iron, and steel industry was based. Chunks of eastern Germany. A large part of Prussia, the most German part of Germany, was taken to create the new state of Poland. Alsace and Lorraine had been taken from France in 1870, and Germany had recently tried to occupy and keep Belgium, chunks of France, and almost all of Poland, so this seemed reasonable outside Germany, but inside Germany any discussion like this was impossible to have. Germans emphasized the hypocrisy of the situation, arguing that Germans were trapped in Poland and Czechoslovakia in particular, contrary to the law of self-determination. The creation of Poland was particularly shocking. This was a large new state on Germany's eastern borders. It was weak and offered little protection from communist Russia, and it was carved out of German land. No one paused to consider that Prussia, Austria, Hungary and Russia had invaded Poland in the 1790s and crushed its independence since then. Newly formed Poland promptly formed military alliances with France and Britain, which seemed to confirm the encirclement fears of German generals. Allied occupation of the Rhineland. Allied forces were to occupy the territory between the River Rhine and the French and Belgian borders for 15 years to ensure no military threat could build up. The territory would be governed, however, by the Reich. If Germany completed its treaty obligations, these forces would leave earlier. Reparations. Because of the war guilt clause, the German state was to compensate Belgium, France, and, to a lesser degree, Britain for the damage it had caused. Importantly, this clause was largely inserted to satisfy French and British public opinion. There was not much real intent to collect it all. The numbers were astronomical. The Inter-Allied Reparations Commission met in January 1920 and concluded its work in April 1921. It set Germany's reparations bill at 132 billion gold marks. The first parts of the payments were made almost immediately, but they were also almost immediately renegotiated to be paid in different ways with different financial instruments over very different timescales. This is something we shall come back to. In fact, the reality of German payments was very modest, but the headline in 1919 was that Germany would have to pay for every piece of damage associated with the war, including, for example, pensions for French soldiers, Anschluss, meant the union of Germany and Austria. Wilson's 14 points highlighted that national identity should define the borders of countries. Yet the treaty banned a union between Germany and Austria, both of whom spoke Germany and Austria. It is not clear if most Austrians at this stage, 1919, thought of joining Germany, but clearly an important principle seemed to have been broken.